What do you collect? Junk?
I like that answer.
Elephants.
Elephants.
Baskets.
Like little ones, not the living ones. Okay, they get
I have
bigger.
big ones, I have small ones, I have stuffed, I have, well, you name it, I got it.
Jewelry. Coins.
Baskets.
Porcelain thimbles and t-shirts.
T-shirts. No. Dogs. Okay. I got two if you want them.
Only had to get two, and that's it. You're lucky you get those two.
Oh, wow.
Oh, no, you just come over and try to deal with it.
Got any stamp collectors among us?
Used to collect green stamps.
What stamps? Green stamps.
I collect
Oh, the little spoon.
Oh,
There you go. There you go.
Yeah,
I mean, our states.
when the British first came,
Uh-huh.
yeah, they had all those stamps. And people were collecting.
The stamp bag?
Those are some old stamps. The Portuguese.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
remember that. Good stuff. HEB had them.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go over to Matthew chapter 25, and we'll see if that has anything to do with what we're going to be talking about.
Well, we collect many things.
That's right. Matthew 25. We're going to start our reading here in verse 14. Again, it will be like a man who has gone on a journey and called his servants and entrusted them his property. To one he gave 5 talents of money, and to another 2 talents, and to yet another he gave 1 talent, each one according to his abilities. And then he went on a journey. The man who had received the 5 talents went out at once and put his money to work, and he gained 5 more. So also the one who had 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole, and put it in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time the master returned to his servants and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with the 2 talents also came to the master and said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness. Then the man who had received the 1 talent came to his master. He said, I know that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid. I went out and I hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked and lazy servant. You knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put the money in deposit with the bankers, so that when I return, I would receive them back with interest. And take the talent from him. Give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has, more will be given, and to the one, and he who has abundance. But whoever does not have, what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. All right, what is Jesus teaching us in this parable? What is Jesus teaching us in this parable?
Don't waste your talent.
Don't waste your talents. Don't waste your talents. Why is Jesus telling this parable? Okay? Everyone has potential.
Everybody has to. Like that. One. We all have potential.
Yeah.
Knowledge is potential. And it's like, so,
And I love that point, right? Because each one was given according to their ability. And one of them did not live up to their potential. Right? The master gave them what he thought they could handle. And this master, or this servant, looked at himself and said, I am incapable of managing what my master has entrusted to me. And because of his lack of confidence, that's exactly what happened. He wasn't capable because he hid it. He did not live up to his potential, what he could have done.
one word describes it. Lazy. Thoughtlessness. You didn't even try. So much you could have done. You didn't even have to work. The bank could have worked for you.
Right? No. If you'd have just gone over to the banker, right? What could it have gained if it was with the bank? Not too much. Just slightly more than it would have rotting in the ground.
It would have been more.
One is more than zero.
One is more than zero. That is true.
And he wasn't even willing to take it to the bank.
That's right. He wasn't even willing to take it to the bank.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to unpack there. There really is. Now, what had taken place right before Jesus told this parable? What's taken place? Okay, so the parable, the 10 virgins that we looked at last week, took place right before this.
And the day and the
Right? So the big debate about the day and the hour, Jesus is talking about the coming of the Lord, a day of judgment, and the destruction of the temple, because the disciples and Jesus were where? In Jerusalem, at the temple.
Still at this party, let's just say, right?
Yeah, I mean-
we're still surrounded by the Pharisees and the Sadducees.
Well, we've moved slightly beyond that because, so we're in the last week of Jesus' life, right? Jesus has cleared the temple, done some teaching, done some miracles, and we're looking at a conversation that takes place after they get back to the Mount of Olives, after being in the temple, right? Because the disciples are looking around and they say, look at these massive stones. Look at these gorgeous buildings. Look at the magnificence of the Lord's temple, this place of our gathering and our worship. And Jesus turns to them and says, I tell you the truth, not one stone will be left upon another. And it was a gut punch to these guys. Right? So when they get back to the Mount of Olives, they gather up their courage and they say, okay, when's that going to happen? And this is part of his teaching to his disciples. Right? So it's a small group, small gathering of his closest disciples at the end of his life, when they should be their most able to handle the difficult teachings. Right? So that's where we're at in this. Now, based upon our discussion last week, or at least I lean towards the fact that the parable of the 10 virgins is referring to the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. Because it's leaning towards and talking about that event specifically, this is also a follow-up teaching to what Jesus is talking about there. So he's talking about a day of judgment upon the nation of Israel that is coming soon, but the time and the hour is not yet been revealed. Right, so that's what's going on in the context. Right? So he's encouraging them, be prepared, be ready. Don't be like the foolish virgins who only brought their lamps and only brought enough oil that the lamps could hold. Be ready for what is coming. Be prepared for what is coming. Right? We talked last week. We're not supposed to go off and be these preppers, right? We're not called to have a bunker somewhere. But Jesus is saying, be prepared for what is coming. Be aware of what is coming down the road. Be ready to go. Because the one place when these events take place that you don't want to be is Jerusalem. Right? Be ready to go. Right? All right. Now, before we get into the weeds too much, let's deal with the math a little bit. How much is a talent of silver or gold? How much is a talent? 75 pounds. 75. Off by 5 pounds. That's hardly anything. If I could get... I'm claiming it's nothing. Right? So 75 pounds. Right? That's what a talent is. Now, 75 pounds, that's a good amount. It's especially a lot when you're talking about precious metals. Right? So 75 pounds of silver or gold is a lot. Right? Now, how do you calculate the value of 75 pounds of gold? How do we take what they were talking about then and bring it to today? Convert it to ounces.
5 times about $4,500.
Okay.
So there's 75,380 ounces.
Right. Something like that.
Yeah.
I'll trust you. You're the mathematician with us.
If you multiply times $4,000, I think you're getting somewhere in the millions. I haven't.
Too many zeros.
Yeah.
So the math that I have done, if you do it by weight, right? So we can take the current value of gold by weight, and you can multiply, an ounce of gold and what that then qualifies in a pound, and then multiply that out. You get approximately $5 million, just north of $5 million for one talent, just in gold.
That's today's.
That's today's value of pound for pound gold, right? Now, that's one way to calculate it. What's another way that we might calculate the value of what Jesus is talking about here?
Gifts he's given to you is certain talents.
Okay.
How much is a day?
Right. So the other way to work this out is to say, okay, what was the buying power back then? Right? And the easiest way to do that is to say, okay, there's a denarius is a day's wage, right? How many denariuses make up a talent, right? And you figure all those things up. So long and short of it is a talent is 20 years' wages for a day laborer. One talent is 20 years' wages in the palm of your hand, right? So you could do the math on that. So 20 years of wages at $11 an hour, and you end up with just north of $500,000. Okay, $555 or $54,000. That's what a talent is worth by from the worker to today, based on that metric. So you can use either one, right? Now, the point is not so much the dollar amount, right? That's not what Jesus is trying to communicate, right? He's trying to communicate in large amounts the way that governments talk about their budgets, right? We're talking about weights and amounts that most people never see, right? You walk into a corporate board meeting and they talk about, the budget, and they're talking about the amount of zeros that just does not compute to the average person's mind, right? And that's what we have going on here, right? It's helpful to say, okay, we're looking at 75 pounds of gold. You know, that's about $5 million, you know, and we can do the math. But the point really is we're talking about large sums of money, right? Now, Randy brings up an interesting point, and one that I think deserves some discussion, which is the word talent, referring to a poundage of precious metals, referring to an amount of money, buying power. So in English, we also have the word talent, meaning your skills, the abilities that you have, the things that you can do. Is that play on words valid? Right? When we're looking at what God has given to us as servants of the Lord, is our abilities one that is worthy of lumping into the discussion here?
I think it's giving you those birth or whatever. Then you those talents to serve Him. Whatever you're good at, you can. If you're good at it, you need to maximize it. Because the fact that you can do more good than someone who doesn't have that talent. Clean. Cook.
If you do math, do math.
Do math. That's right. That's right. That's right. So, you know, I've always felt like it was a God-given gift, and that you use that talent to serve Him. If you don't, you're going to be down here with this lazy servant.
No. Did anyone disagree? I would concur. I think when it gets down to the brass nuts of us dealing with what we're able to do, right, and how this applies to us, we're talking about, right, from everything from what we collect, right, to what we have as far as resources, money, or, you know, gardens or otherwise, or whether it just be skills, right, the ability to work on vehicles, or the ability to, you know, crunch numbers, and all those things are skills and talents that God has given us according to our ability. Right? So, the Matthew principle, okay?
Those who have more will be given. That's divided in many ways. Our layman's term, you don't use it, then we have an idea of what that magic is. Because that what little you don't, what little you have, you don't use, you use it, no matter how small it is.
Right.
You know, and the more you use something, more doors open for you. That's just the way it is. I'll take something simple. Half of the scriptures. You don't read them. But the more you read, the more you add, and the more doors are open. The more you understand, the more doors keep open. So the more you read, the more you use, the more you it starts. It's an abundance, and that's just the way. No, the more money you make, the more doors are open. More people want this because you know more people. More secluded was the liberal. So this principle, this Matthew principle, affects us in more than one way. And want to spread the gospel, have to love the gospel. Love the gospel. So all these doors can open, but if none of that is done, then what little we have done will be taken. And we're left with nothing except.
All right. So, the servant, first servant, is entrusted with 5 talents. approximately 375 pounds of precious metal. He's going to need some friends to help him move that from the giving location to its secondary location, if not a wagon. That's approximately 100 years' wage. 100 years of wages. Approximately $25 million, a little over, almost 26, or almost 3 million, depending on how you calculate that up. The second man is given 2 talents, 40 years' wages, 150 pounds, approximately. I did the math wrong there somewhere. Oh, no, there I am. Okay. 10 million or 1 million, depending on how you do the math there, right? Whether it's by weight, bigger number, or by hours worked. The last man is given 1 talent, 20 years' wages, at 75 pounds of precious metals, approximately 5 million or $500,000, depending on how you calculate that up. Why did this master give his servants these amounts? Why is he giving them these amounts? To see what they would do with it. Okay.
They want to be like, give too much to one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
According to their ability.
yes.
You know, and I think that's a very key phrase in this. He gave them each according to their ability. Right? So the master, knowing these men, knowing his servants, he said, here's what I think you're capable of. Right? So the first man goes out. He has 5 talents. Immediately puts that money to good use, puts it to work, and what does he do with it? What does he gain? He doubles it. He gets 5 more. Right? Now, we don't know how long the master was in coming, but in the amount of time that took place, he was able to double what he had been given. Right? So he went off, he made 5 more. So he went from the 25 million to 50 million. Right? From 375 pounds to 750 pounds of precious metals. From 100 years' wages to 200 years' wages. Right? That's however you want to look at it. Right? He's doubling that amount. Second guy goes out, has been given 2 talents. He immediately does the same thing. He goes out and he puts those 2 talents to work. Right? He goes off, and how much does he gain? He gains 2 more talents. Right? He doubles it once again. Right? He goes from, let's see here, keep my math correct, from 40 years' wages to 80 years' wages. From 150 pounds to 300 pounds. From $10 million to $20 million. Right? So he's doubling it. What did the third servant do?
Buried it.
He buried it. Okay, now, to be fair to this gentleman, burying a valuable in rabbinic tradition is the safest way to keep it. Right, you bury it. However, there is a story that is told. Let me see if I can find it here in my notes. Okay. So a miser sold his property, bought a mass of gold, and then buried it in a secret place, which he then frequently visited to inspect it. Someone who had noticed his coming and going forth of the treasure went and then carried it off. When the miser returned and discovered his loss, he wailed and tormented and fret in grief. Someone who saw him agonizing after learning the cause said, "Don't grieve, my friend. just take some stones and bury them in the same place and think of them as gold in value. And the gold, even when it was gold, you made no use of it. Ouch! Right? So while the use of the bearing of a valuable in order to preserve it was something within their culture that was well understood, right? It's the idea of putting it in a safe, right? That keeps it safe, right? That keeps it secure. But if you're just going to keep it in the safe, what good is it? Right? What value is that? And I like this retelling of this rabbinical parable of Jesus' day, which basically points out, well, just think of the rocks as gold because you weren't using them anyway, and they're in your mind of the same value. Paint them gold. It'll have the same effect, right? And I think that's really kind of what Jesus is getting at here. He went and he put it in the ground, and the money had no ability to grow if it would have been with the bankers. It had no ability to benefit the community. So it had no worth, right? Yeah, and I think that's something to consider as well, right? I found it interesting when we were reading through this, the way that the first two servants respond to their master. You entrusted to me, and here, look, I have gained. Right? So the first two servants saw what was given to them as an entrustment. And they, as good trustees, have grown it. And here it is. It's yours. You've entrusted it to me. Now, if you worked for somebody who took constant risks, who was constantly working to figure out a way to make a buck, right, and was reaping where they did not sow and gathering where they had not scattered, right? They were. Well, if you're reaping from something that you have not put time and effort and energy into, you're taking advantage of the opportunities that just come along, despite the fact that you have not tended them, right? This concept of being a hard man, somebody who's taking advantage and taking the opportunities that come along, right? Even the ones they haven't been tending the whole way, right? So he's walking along, he sees some grain, right? Well, that's not grain you planted, yeah, but it was grain that was available to me. I'm going to take advantage of that opportunity, and I'm going to make that profit. If you're working for somebody who is of that mindset, and you come back and you say, okay, you entrusted to me X amount of dollars, I went out and I tried to put it to work and I failed. How is that man going to respond to the fact that they tried something and it just didn't work out the way they thought it would? Yeah, the fact that he's a hard master might mean that he was upset, right? But what's better, to have tried and failed if you're in the business of innovation and growing it, to try and fail or to not try at all? Which is worse? Not to try at all. I would love to have, a small loan of $1 million and then be able to file bankruptcy a couple times, and then make my million, right? I mean, that would be wonderful if I had that opportunity.
But some people do have that opportunity.
And some do.
And, they win the lotto and within 5 years, they're broke. They're poor.
Mhm.
Because they just can't think outside the box. That's the danger that we can all fall into. In that, at one point, fall into that box. advantage over the illiterate. People learn how to read, but we are those that know how to read, don't read. We're doing the same thing as that man bearing that ability.
Right.
Because we don't read. You know, people, have you read your Bible? No. Have you know any of the books of the Bible? No. Have you read any commentaries of the Bible? No. Okay. Have you seen on YouTube? No. But I can tell you about this.
But I can tell you the scores of everything that's going on with the Cowboys.
Yeah.
The Spurs.
The Spurs. So, I mean, in essence, we're still comparing ourselves to that person with that one talent.
Right.
In that take advantage of what we have to glorify the Lord. And at the same time, grow. Because you have to grow in understanding.
Yeah.
And you can't do it without you even trying
Without
to
trying.
do something.
Right.
But I want to read because it's boring. And some of these names I can't pronounce. You know,
No, yeah, no, definitely. I think one of the things from the perspective, and I think there is some questioning, right? You try and fail. Maybe he is going to be mad. Maybe he is going to be disappointed. Maybe he is going to be upset. But honestly, I think we can all agree that it is better if he had tried and failed than if he had not tried at all. And he didn't try at all, right? Go ahead, Arnold, before I make my closing point.
Verse 19.
Okay?
Now, after a long time, the master of those slaves, long time. That's relative, right?
It is. Yeah.
I interpret
Yes.
it doesn't matter if you live 5 years, 6 years. It's a long time. I think that's what telling about. Had a whole lifetime.
Yeah. He had lots of time.
Well, there were time it is. The other thing that I noticed here is Master said to him, "Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful over a few things." Those few things is how we all start. I'm going to call them the 5 steps. Salvation, we all start there. Somebody says, "I will set you over many things." Not expected to stay there.
Right.
Yes, it's great that you did that. Not baptized. Now what?
What? Yeah.
Again, we give you a long time.
Right. Yeah.
hard man, not an evil man.
Right.
It's a big difference.
Right.
He's not gonna whoop you. You know, he's a fair man.
Right.
Like, you can do it. That's why I gave you this.
Right. Yeah. I'm giving it to you according to your ability. Right. And I agree with you, Arnold. I think the best interpretation of this is the long time is a lifetime, especially for us. Right? God has given us talents. God has given us ability. God has given us resources according to our abilities. And the question is, how are you using them? Right? And when we look at this last man, he was given an opportunity where he could not fail, and he chose the one path that led to failure. Right? He could have tried and failed in an endeavor. He could have come back and said, "Look, Master, you gave me one talent. You entrusted me with one talent. I made some mistakes. I made some investments and I made some decisions that I thought were going to be prosperous and they weren't. Here is half a talent back." Right? And he might have been frustrated, but he wouldn't have been nearly as frustrated as the fact that he came back and said, "I knew you were a hard man. You're able to do things I can't do. I didn't even try." Right? That's worse. Right? So he was really given an opportunity where he could try anything he wanted, and he didn't try at all. He chose the one path of failure. And this gentleman who did not try at all, He doesn't see it as a stewardship. He sees it as a burden. You gave me this burden in life, and what have I done? I've buried it so that I can give it back to you at the end, because I don't want anything to do with it.
You probably have again, the lesson is don't give up.
Right.
You know, try it once. Try it and then you like that little couch. Try it again. Have a lifetime.
Yeah. Could you imagine, and I love this thought, that this thought train we're on right here. Could you imagine having $1 million in the bank and having opportunities over a lifetime come up where you could invest in them? And over and over and over again going, you know what, I'm not going to worry about going to dig it up. I'm not going to take the opportunity to invest in that startup, right? The old thing of Forrest Gump, somebody came by and offered me some shares of some Apple, and I decided, and it went real well, and they said I don't have to work no more, right? Like, you missed all these startups in life, all these opportunities to invest, all of the opportunities to help somebody, right? You walked by time and time again the beggars in the streets, and you didn't even go out to help them with it. You just left it buried over a lifetime. Right? At least he could have done was invested with the banks. Yep, go for it. I may have an answer.
How is this?
Yeah, I think we're talking about it in earthly ways. And even the kingdom is currently operating in earthly space, right? So when we're talking about the values, right, the opportunities, we are to some extent still talking about physical goods and services, right? So if you had $1 million, right, if upon our birth into Christ, God handed us $1 million and said, okay, go do something for the kingdom with it, how would you invest that? What would be your approach to investing that into people, into community, into good, so that God would get an investment back? Right? I mean, sure, you could take that talent and you could give it away a piece at a time to the homeless, right? And that would perform a good, right? And in the mind and in the eye of our Lord, the taking care of those in need has value, right? That would be accomplishing its purpose. But in the same way, you could also take that, and work it in such a way where it's also maintaining some of its value, right? In that it does some self-sustaining, right? Where it's actually doubling, right? You're able to invest in a home to take care of kids, and eventually that grows to a point where you now have multiple homes taking care of even more kids, right? Where you're making that small investment. But I also think, and we talked about this at the beginning, it's not just talking about money, right? Some of us aren't blessed with money, right? Some of us that, for whatever reason, the Lord has looked at us and said, you are not getting, $1 million loan. Not getting that to you. Don't know why. I think I'd be good with it, but he said no, right? But he has blessed us in other ways, right? We've had grandmothers or mothers or whoever who's taught us how to sew. We've had people come along and show us how to mechanic or how to work lumber or how to cook or how to garden or how to fill in the blank. We have skills that we can use. How are we using those skills for the kingdom, for people? Right?
Draw comparison. That coming to Christ, coming to the world, you're a newborn as well. Oh, there's just so much potential.
Yeah.
You see a child and you see so much potential. They can be anything. But they're at that point that they can be anything. At the same time, they are nothing.
Yeah.
The potential is there. And as they grow, they can be doctors, lawyers, they can be so many things. And as time goes on, and you're like, well, okay, you're 15, 16. Now you're 40. What have you done with your time? Like, well, I haven't. Yeah, but you're not 15 anymore. You're not 20 anymore. And we can draw that too with the church. So you can baptize 20 years. What have you done with that?
Right.
What was that potential? Have you read? Do you serve the table? Do you help? Baptized 30 years. Yes, but where have you grown? Where's that potential that you need to do? So, in here we can see the comparisons. It can be compared in every situation that as we come into this world, there's so much potential, but as we come into our spiritual world, there's potential there as well. And if we're not putting in that effort, we're just going to be children, which is one of the things that, Paul, I still have to give you milk.
Yeah, not solid food.
You guys are not growing because we're not putting in the effort to grow. So we're all born with this potential more. And like you said, Arnold said, no, okay, get off your pew.
Right.
You'll just sit there and do something as you get older. And, that's why the scripture says, desire to be a deacon, desire to be an elder, desire to be preacher, desire to be a teacher. And prepare yourself. Right. You have to prepare yourself. So when, at any kind of moment, someone, hey, can you give up that? Can you help with this? Can you help with that? And you're like, well, I don't know. I'm not scared. What have you been doing? 25 years?
Right.
So we can see how it can, on secular and spiritual, because the word of the Lord is just vast. Right. And we can see that our focus here is trying to grow in the Lord, come into this new, live in this new life. How can we surrender it to the Lord?
And going back to the point about, we have a master, right, that we are serving, who has entrusted us with a great amount of value, right, where we can't lose if we try. Because not only do we serve a master who's going to be less upset with us if we try and fail than if we don't try at all, we serve a master who's still with us and who is going to be working in and through us if we are doing things seeking to do his will. Right? If we're trying to do his will and we're trying to do things his way, then he is going to bless those efforts. So we're so scared of failure that we often don't do anything. And maybe we have done some things and they didn't go the way we thought they should. Right? Maybe we had the eyes of the CEO worldly, metrics saying, we went to the park and we talked with the homeless and we gave them food, and it's always money out and it's never people in seats. Okay, but that is not the economics of the kingdom, right? The economics of the kingdom is, am I being faithful with what God has given to me, and am I making a positive impact upon my community, making the world look more like heaven is on earth? You know, there's been lots of missionaries who have gone out and served and been faithful in their place, and the church has not grown beyond 25, 30, 40 people, right? Are they failures? Are they less effective missionaries? Are they unable to preach? No. For whatever reason, that is where that congregation's at. But are they faithful? Are they going to be told, well done and good and faithful servant, on that wonderful day?
About trying.
Yes.
Gotta try. Learn, get better. Better, so you're still trying. I've heard this said by some people. That's why lawyers say that they're practicing law. You know, 'cause they don't know all of it.
Right.
Doctors practice medicine. They're trying. They're trying and they're trying. If they would react the way some of us react, quitting, there'd be no doctors.
Yes.
There'd be no lawyers. There'd be no professionals. One thing I want to also correct here is that few things. We talked about that. You were faithful with a few things. I think that goes into what Michael was saying, as far as what we do in church or worship. Do it maybe in our home. Few things. I think what Jesus is getting to is we need to go disciple. Lead disciples. Have more disciples. Help those disciples become disciples. That's what we're expected to do. Go and preach. Baptize. They can have a few things. They all going to succeed out of my hands. Apostles say that. I may be wrong. I do.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think so often we're too hard on ourselves when we go to evaluate a ministry and a work. I'm reminded of the old lady who came up to the preacher, tears in her eyes, and just been like, I feel like I failed the Lord. I just haven't done anything of value in my life. And he looks at her and he says, you have 4 sons, 3 of them are preachers, one's an elder, all of them have served in missions, and you have several daughters, and they're... What do you mean your life is a failure? What do you mean you haven't been faithful to the Lord? You have done great things for the Lord, greater things than so many will do for the Lord, right? So I think sometimes we evaluate ministry wrong. We look at what we've done wrongly. But we do want to make sure that we're not the one looking at these situations and saying, you know what, my one skill isn't of any worth. I can't do anything, so I'm just going to wait and watch. God says, do something with it. Right? Be like the one who goes out and learns one more skill, gains one more resource, puts that resource to work in some way. Right? I think the master would have been thrilled if he had said, I knew you were a hard man, so I went and I paid off all of the people that you stole grain from, and I invested in our community and took care of the poor and the widows. I think he would have been more happy with that than had he come back and said, well, here's 2 talents. Because at least he did something with it. And our master, I guarantee you, would be thrilled if that's what we did. That we're investing our time, our energy, our resources, our abilities into serving others and taking care of our communities. So when we look at this parable, I think it really is talking about us as servants and the kingdom good investments over our lifetime trying to make an impact on the kingdom. And I think we do have to ask ourselves, God has blessed me in different ways. How am I using that? How am I using the earthly abilities blessings I've received in order to make an impact in the spiritual kingdom. And I hope that we will take some time to consider what I have. I was blessed to be able to hang out with a bunch of the area preachers here in the valley yesterday, and the Bridge Avenue Church has a garden, community garden that they're working on, and their plan is to use their tomatoes to get into the homes of the impoverished neighborhood near them several times as they harvest those tomatoes, giving those away, and focusing their vacation Bible school around those families. Now that is a new approach that I think has some potential, right? That's unique to them, right? But to utilize a skill and a resource like land and gardening to then make an impact in people and find a way to then work in the gospel, right? Let's rethink how we invest these things, and let's stop putting our talents in the ground. Let's be thinking. Let's pray.
Sorry, have an update.
Okay.
I have an update on Mary Lynn Fitz.
Okay.
She was taken to the ER in the afternoon, but all of the cardio tests showed she did not.
Good. That's it? She's home. All right. Well, let's pray. Father, I come before you today. I thank you for the talents that you've given to us, the resources, the blessings, the abilities that you have blessed us with. Help us to be good stewards of what you've given to us. Help us to see ourselves as stewards, to use those things to bless those around us, to make an impact on your kingdom. And maybe along the way we will gain some additional resources, some additional skills that we might be able to invest as well. Lord, we're grateful when we hear that those of our number who are dealing with health issues have received answers, and that progress is being made. We ask that you will continue to put your healing hands upon them, give them safety and restoration back to us, and restoration of their health. We love you, Father. We're so grateful that we get to call you our Father, that we get to follow you. Help us to be good stewards of what you've given to us. In your Son's name I ask and I pray.